In our second lesson, we're gonna open the same image and I'm gonna show you how to take the full advantage of your raw file using multiple exposure after you finish a shooting or an editorial. So let's jump on it. We're gonna open again our raw file. And as you can see, our image is a little bit underexposed. But the first thing you gonna do before you're gonna open a raw file and start editing is to go down here when it says 8-bit. You can leave Adobe RGB 1998 because after we're gonna export it anyway to a different color space. The widest gamut of the color space is a ProPhoto RGB, but our camera records pictures in Adobe RGB 1998, so we're gonna keep this color space, but we're gonna go on a 16 bits channel. So we're gonna take advantage of the full raw file size and on the full image. Okay, just hit OK, and now we're gonna start editing. So at first, we see that our image is correctly exposed here on the forehead and on the cheekbone, but we have also some darker areas. Also here on the arm, it's a little bit underexposed, so I've specifically chosen this image to show you how to use camera raw and how to take advantage of a double exposure. Using a raw file, you can actually create more than one image from the same raw file using different exposures and then combine them in Photoshop to create an image that has a much wider dynamic range instead of using just a normal regular JPEG. If we will do that with the JPEG directly in Photoshop, we will lost a lot of details that we don't want. Maybe you want to shoot for a client that's gonna print this image into a magazine or into a bigger print onto a wall or something, and it's very useful to know that you can also do that, and I'm gonna teach you now. So first, looking at our image, I see that it's a little bit underexposed. So what we're gonna do, we go here at the exposure and we're gonna bring up a little bit of exposure, like 0.4, almost one stop difference. I'm not concerned yet about what we learned in our first lesson about this dark dress and the fact that we can't see much in it, because we're gonna duplicate this image and we're gonna combine the shadows from the next edit onto this one. So I'm only concerned on the things that I want to see on the model skin. So I'm concerned about the exposure, and the second thing I'm concerned is about the color balance. Is my white balance perfectly balanced? Well, I think we can get a little bit warmer here. I think there's room to get a little bit warmer. I think like this. I think 5500 it's a perfect number for this image, and I can see that we have a yellow tint in our subtones of the skin, and maybe we can push the purple tint a little bit more. If you're not sure, you can do this trick to calibrate my eyes. I go up into the purples and then go back down. And as you can see now, it looks much better. Another thing, and another advice that I want to give you, when you're editing a picture for a long time, maybe it's good after 15 or 20 minutes after editing, it's good to stand up from your monitor, from your desk, go take a cup of tea, relax a bit, go outside, just for you to relax your eyes. And when you come back to the monitor and you come back to your picture, you'll see the colors in a different way. And because after you spend so many minutes editing colors and editing the pictures, you can't see the difference because your eyes get adjusted to what your monitor feeds you. So if you're taking constantly breaks, that's perfect because you can have a final accurate image and a good habit and a good colorization. Okay, now let's get back into our picture. I think I wanna go with our shadows a little bit higher, but I'm not concerned on the dress. I'm only concerned here on this area. So I'm pushing a little bit more. Oh, using Alt and click. Using Alt and click, you can zoom in and out, or Control is the same thing. So I'm very pleased with this image. We're gonna open this image. We are not concerned right now about the other things. We are just concerned about the temperature, exposure, and highlights or shadows. We're gonna open the image. And right away, we have a much better exposure on the skin. And right now, we're gonna open the picture again. We're just gonna drag and drop the raw file onto our picture. Right now we have the same raw file and with the same edits, but now we are interested in only how the dress looks, because in these pictures we have the background, we have the dress and the model. These are the main keys to our image. So right now we're gonna push up the shadows until we can see the dress. Oh, okay, this is way better. As I can see, we have a little bit of noise into our blacks here, so we can go to detail and crank up the noise reduction. Okay, 35 looks much better. Look at this, before and after, before and after. This is great. Let's hit OK. And now we have the second image that we have created from the same raw file, just on top of our original image. As you can see, this is our original image and this is our second image. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how I arrange my windows in Photoshop to make my life easier. And as you can see, I have a navigator here. This is just a habit of my old version of Photoshop where you could not move the image, but this is a very, very good option to know where you are and just to move the image up and down, or to get fast into an area, or you can use space and click to move the image exactly where you want it. Libraries, right now I don't need the library, so we can close this panel. Under my navigator, I just put my adjustment layer. If you don't find your navigator, you can go to Window and click on Navigator, and you can drag and drop it here. And under my adjustment options, I'm gonna put my layers. Another options, if you recently installed Photoshop, or your panel options may look like this, very, very small, like this. What I do always in my Photoshop, I just put on a layer bounds. I don't want to see entire document, because if I have only like a line or a brush stroke, I just want to identify as soon as possible my layer, and I want my layer thumbs to be as big as possible to see them. So this is my background image. I'm gonna rename this file dress shadows. Okay, right, now that we have the second image on top of our first image, on top of the background, what we want is to select and keep only the dress exposed correctly. And as you can see, we crank up the shadows, but we also crank the shadows here in the hairlines. We don't want that. We have too many shadows cranked up high here on the model's face, and we don't want that. So first thing, we are going to create a layer mask. Just click here on this button and you will create a layer mask. Let me show you, if you don't know about the layer masks, you can skip this part, but I'm going to explain you what the layer mask does. I'm going to create a new, just going to create a new image here, and I'm going to color it in this pink. Okay, and we create a second layer here using this button, which is a blank layer on top, and let's pick another color. Let's pick, let's say, blue. Okay, so we're gonna paint all this blue on top of our pink, because we want to work in a professional environment way. We don't want to create destructive processes. So we want to go back. If something goes wrong, we want to go back and at any each time. Let's say we clone stamp something, or we modify something that we don't like. We need to be able to go back. Some of you will say, oh, but we have a history brush, or we have history. Yes, we have history, but this is a very limited amount of pushes. The history or the Control or Command Z on Mac, it's very limited. You can't go up until you open the image. So what we use is so-called a layer mask. So we hit this button, and as you can see, we have a layer mask option here on the right of our layer. And if we paint black on white, as you can see here, we have our layer mask, and immediately the color changes in white and black. If we paint black on the layer mask, as you can see, the layer behind it begins to appear. Okay? If let's delete the layer mask and create one again. If you invert the layer mask using Control I, now the whole blue layer is hidden away. So if we want to bring the blue layer up and we want to show up the blue layer, just switch the color from the black to white, and now we can paint with the blue. So this is how a layer mask works. And let's go back into our image. So I've created the layer mask that I'm gonna invert it. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna go on the brush, right click on the brush, hardness and size. I want a size to be a little bit bigger. Oh, okay. And now we can paint the dress. And as we start to paint the dress, you will see that our layer mask turns white on the areas that we bring up with our shadows. Use the Z and click. If you want a shortcut to change the brush size, you can use the square brackets on your keyboard to increase or decrease the size. And now we're gonna paint onto the black dress. Using the navigator, we're gonna go here. If we go with the brush on the skin like this, you can also push X or invert the colors with the black, and you can go back on the skin and revert what you're doing. To go faster, you can go like this with a bigger brush size and then refine the edges later. Also, the fact that you, okay, like this, now let's refine our selection here with the brush. Keep in mind that it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be uniform and to don't have big differences in your image. Oh. If you want another fast shortcut to change your change your brush size, on Windows you can hold Control Alt and right click, and then if you move left or right you change the size, and if you move up and down you can change the hardness of the brush. So this is gonna speed up your editing process even more. It looks okay. You just missed a spot here. Let's go back onto the brush. And now we successfully created our first multi-exposure image. That's a very good base to start editing an image. Right now, we have the second image from our raw file. And as we can see, the shadows are a little bit too much. For me, it looks okay, but I think we can turn down the opacity a little bit. Let's go maybe on the 80%. This looks fantastic. Now look at this. This is a before and this is after. Okay, so what we did, we used the same raw file to create two images with two different exposure and then combining them using a layer mask in Photoshop, and using also an undestructive process. Using this layer mask, if I hold shift and click, I can still have the whole layer untouched, and I can still go back if I want to edit something else on it. We successfully created our first multiple exposure image, starting from a single row, combined them together in Photoshop using a layer mask, and we successfully created a beautiful image that's gonna be the base of our further editing. So let's move further with our edit.